This is the second session of our sixth week of the Quranic Studies course. But to begin with, I'll continue the discussion that we started last session, and it was so to continue our discussion about the resurrection, the day of judgment, and the heaven and hell description in the Quran. We go on to continue the discussion from that point that we stopped, like the gathering before God and the angels. So we try to speak about one principal idea in the Quran, that was that whatever God is doing for resembling, gathering humankind into the day of judgment, there is one point that Quran says that it kind of governs another names of God. So it governs the action of God, and that was the mercy of God governing other names of God or other qualities of God. And then we point to the question that one may ask whether God or a sense of God can be governed by something else. And then one of the possible answers that Muslim scholars try to give to this question is that he is not governed by something outside of him, but this is his own, rule that he wants to follow. And then that's in the, if it divide, imagine if we say that God has an essence and God has names and attributes, this is happening in the field of his names and attributes. So this, a name governing another name, or an attribute governing another attribute. So imagine if you are a person, at the same time student, sometimes you may work part-time, and so main characteristic of you is an artist. You do study international relations, and also you like music and other things as well. But there is one principal thing that probably governs all of your interests, and which is your being very a person who likes, for example, art. And then that also could affect every aspect of your other works as well. So in continuation of our discussion about the day of judgment, we see that there is a scene that God depicts it in the Quran, as well as what he did in prior scriptures. So chapter 78, verse 38 talks about the angels and a spirit. So on that day, the spirit and the angels will stand in ranks. So one question is that, so what is a spirit and what are those angels? Usually in the Islamic context, a spirit is Gabriel, or a spirit is a very close angel to God. And other angels that are, standing in ranks. So it shows to the reader that angels are, having hierarchies. They are all angels, but some angels have higher position and higher, sacredness than the other angels in the eye of God. So in continuation, chapter 69 verse 17 talks about the angels will be on either side, and 8 will bear up the throne of your Lord. Now, it's interesting to go back to the Bible as well and see how Bible talks about angels and God and throne of God at the same time. Um, um, Probably talking about the day of judgment or a vision that prophet or saint talks about what he has seen. So in the book of Revelation, uh, verse 11, you read that, then I looked and heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000s. So manyness of the angels here. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. So the imagery of angels who surrounded the throne of God is coming in the Bible, so as mentioned in the book of Revelation. And so also here, Quran speaks about the angels also carrying the throne of God, another idea of the throne of God. So let's also look at the book of Ezekiel, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, in the firmament that was above the head of the cherubims, there appeared over them, as it were, a sapphire stone with the appearance of the likeness of the throne. So the idea of throne is also there. And also the idea of throne in Islamic history were discussed, whether this is physical throne, whether it's not a physical throne. A part of Muslim scholars like Asharites, they tried to say that we do not ask questions. They didn't talk about it and asked. They said that talking about this is an innovation in religion, and if you talk and try to explore the notion of throne, then you are making an innovation in religion, and innovation in Islam is forbidden, and you're doing a wrong thing. But the point is that, and for another group of scholars was saying that, well, there is a throne, and that is not a physical thing, because God is not physical. God is invisible. We cannot specify the quality or the we can specify that God is not material and invisible, and then the throne must not be a physical thing, as well as the angels that you see that are described in the Quran and in the Bible. When you talk about the thousands and thousands of Bible of angels, then the thousands and thousands and one throne. So either the throne is too large, humongous, and then, or the space is not a matter. Where a space is not a matter, the space is not matter at some point that is spaceless, is beyond a space and also beyond time. So millions of them are at the same place at the same time, and there is no matter of a space being limited. So this is this is what Quran suggests about the angels. But the number of angels in the Quran was said that to be eight of them. I mean, a spirit about and a specific name for a noun angel. And the Arabic eight is ثمانية, which probably, according to Gabriel said Reynolds in his The Quran and the Bible, it's said Samania or eight to, because it bears the throne, because the Arabic Thamania rhymes with the verse that precede and follow it. So he thinks that it's for the, it's to serve the rims of the previous and following verse in the Quran. So the number over there is not like an exact number, but it's just for the purpose of rhythm. Now let's go to the next slide. I know that we mentioned this part as well in our discussion last week, but let me have a very quick look at this part as well. So we are discussing about a book. So the other concept here in the Day of Judgment, which is discussed in the Quran as well, is about the books of people having books, their own books. I discussed this, but I'm going back to this part, chapter 69, verse 18, talks that day you will be brought into the open, and nothing that you concealed will remain hidden. So he received his books in his right hand, and he who receives his book in his right hand says, "Look, read my book," because he's happy. And then the opposition is those who are receiving their book in the left hand. And now the point is that probably in the chapter Al-Waqi'ah, or the event, two groups of people are discussed in that chapter as well: the companions of the right and the companions of the left. Both of them are also carrying the same meaning, to say that those right people are the righteous ones, in the leftist, the people or companions of the left are not the righteous people. So the idea expressed in the Quran in different ways, and so among them is the idea that, so whether their book is in their right hand or left hand, or whether they are described as companions of the right and the left as well. Another imagery that says described in the Quran about the Day of Judgment is the separation of the good and bad people, in which both heaven and hell are described as having guardians. So there are some angels that they are the guardians of the heaven, or gods of the heaven, or gods of the hell, and both of them. So those people of both parties, when they led to hell, for instance, they will be asked if they have received any message or messenger. They say yes. Now, the decrees of punishment that goes to them because they fulfill as unbelievers. And there will be a sound telling them, "Enter the gates of the hell to dwell there forever, an evil abode for the arrogant." Now there is two questions here. One is that what about those people who have never received the message, who have never know the truth of God as God, and you know, but they were good people. So it was also discussed in Islamic tradition as well. And Quran also emphasized on, if we look at the Quran, it talks about those people as mustad'af, those who have, those who didn't know or didn't receive the message, those are fine. Those who also are following the other religions are, and accordingly, I mean, following the religion in a way that they behave good, they believe in God and things like that, on the day of judgment or something like that, they're fine. They will, face their Lord, as a faithful. But the point is that, as I mentioned, when it discusses the day of judgment and the people entering into hell, at some point, Quran talks about some people being eternally kept in the hell. One idea might be that, okay, because of the governing of the mercy of God that we mentioned before, you may think that someone may stay in the hellfire for a good number of time and years, and then after that he may be qualified to go back to paradise or to heaven. This is also talked about. I mean, if someone has some sins and he deserves to go to hell as well, but he doesn't deserve to stay in the hell forever, he goes back to hell, to heaven. But are there a group of people that will be remaining in hellfire forever? Now, if we go back to Quran, there is an idea that God forgives all sins except those polytheists, except those who mention that God has helpers, such as Meccan polytheists. They had those idols, and the notion was that these idols are helping God, and on the other hand, they are mediatory between human being and God. The opposite idea, the second issue, is that when Quran talks about the heaven, then those people who are entering into heaven, they are a group of people that will come to the heaven, and they are eternally there. I mean, there is no idea that someone moves out of the heaven and goes to the hell. No, that the point is that they remain. Those who are in the heaven basically remain in the heaven forever. And then the idea of foreverness, dwelling there. Entering there to dwell forever, and that foreverness also exists in the discussion of paradise. Let's go to the next discussion now. So another discussion of the Day of Judgment in the Quran is the intercession. And it's also a very kind of controversial discussion. In the Quran, you see, as shown in the slide, probably, if you can, you see that there are discussion of intercession in chapter 2, verse 255, which is very famous verse in the Quran, known in Arabic as Ayat al-Kursi, and then it's a kind of probably very similar to some part of Psalms in the Bible, And I mean, there is also an idea that some of the Western scholars of Quran, they said that this might be a translation of a Jewish or Christian hymn. So, but anyway, 255 discusses that there is no intercession except after his permission. We discussed this, but on the other hand, 4386, those on whom they call, we have no power to intercede. Now, intercession, possible and impossible. Possible for those who God permits them, like prophets, like probably martyrs, saints, and those who God does not permit them, like idols. I mean, as we mentioned before, the idol worshipper, they were thinking that those idols will intercede between them and God in order to ask God to forgive their sins. So God, in fact, reject the idea because it's basically based on a polytheism and or what is in Quran as shirk. The base of the idea is shirk, and it's against the very fundamental and principal foundation of faith in the Quran. So, and the next, let's talk about heaven. Heaven is a destination for righteous people, those believers, good ones, those who conducted good, whether for themselves or for the others as well, and in their relation between themselves and God and the universe. Now, chapter 44 reads from verse 51 to 55 reads that those who fear God, those righteous people, will be in a place of safety, salam, among gardens and springs, desert, dressed in silk and brocade. They will sit facing one another. We will join them with large-eyed houris in safety. Can they call? So some of the scholars, especially the Western scholars of the Quran, when they see the verses like this describing paradise and heaven, and the Quran talking about the rivers, talking about the springs, and all other those kind of expression of a better place to live, they try to say that, well, Quran was kind of addressing the people of Arabia, the country or the land in which the desert climate is, is there, and so many people may try to find a better place to live, or or may imagine if living in an area with gardens and rivers and a good amount of water is kind of image that they would like and enjoy thinking about that. Plus, they do have, the expression in the verse says that God makes them to live in peace, and there are spouses for both man and woman too, and they do enjoy living there. This is one point. As if I can share with you my PowerPoint, the other idea is that Quran talks about also when it talks about gardens, and then the point is that it talks in a way to say that to inform people that if there is a garden and if there is a river and a spring in those under those gardens, because it says um, rivers under the gardens. So, and then Quran adds that there are gardens of um, pure water, gardens of milk, gardens. I'm sorry, river of milk, river of pure water, and river of, for instance, honey. One point about the river of milk is expressed in the Quran is that it says that the taste will never change. So the difference between this explanation, I mean the difference between the milk in this world, uh, which is a material, the word of creation and corruption, with the word and heaven that God expresses in Quran, is in this qualities that the taste has never changed. I mean, there's no need for fridges, for instance. And then the point is that there is nothing like corruption there. So you always stay, imagine, as young as you can be, young. So there's no idea of corruption, because corruption is that you get older, you get into age, and so now you're aged, so, and then you go to corruption, your body is corrupt. But the garden or the people in that garden will never, be corrupted. There's no fall for that garden. So there's another also ideas about the heaven in the Quran. Quran doesn't talk only about a garden as heaven. I mean, we can talk about garden or find the garden, the notion of gardens in the Bible and the Old Testament. Also, the kingdom of God. Now, in the Quran, there is, what makes someone to go to heaven. We discussed a little bit, but one of the major higher points of reaching to garden in the Quranic literature is a satisfaction of God. I mean, there's a mutual relationship between human being and God, and there's both satisfactions of both parties. In one verse, Quran talks about God is satisfied with them, and they are satisfied with God. And those people with the hierarchy, they go into the garden of God. So the garden of God is not also described in a way that the other sort of gardens also described in the Quran. On the other hand, one point that one may need to pay attention to in reading Quranic description of heaven is that the word and phrase of mathal, example. Quran talks about the example of that paradise as such and such. It seems that for some commentator, it doesn't talk about the paradises like this and that. It says that it looks like this and that. And that make it, for some, to believe that, well, and Quran talks about an undescribable, unimaginable, every aspect of the Quranic paradise or the heaven or immaterial world is not describable with the letters and imaginations of the world that we are living in. So another example they used to explain this was that, can you talk about the world that we are living in and explain to a baby in the in the womb of his mom or her mom, to say that, well, the world is such and such, you see this and that, this is the description of the Lord. But you know, while he or she is living in a very close, tight, surrounded by water area, and then his eyes is closed, he may hear some sounds, but very ambiguous sounds. And he may tell you that, well, what you say to me, it's imaginable, it's unimaginable. I mean, the word is this word and nothing else. So this is also what some of the commentators of Quran try to explain that. Well, the paradise in the Quran is quite not as exactly as described in the Quran, but you can understand those sometimes metaphorical, metaphorical symbolic language, and but at the same time, maybe yes, maybe something happens between like enjoying. So there must be an enjoying, but you cannot express the taste of that enjoyment with the limitations of the world that you're currently living in. So yeah, the discussion of paradise in this sense, one point needs to be added there. The point is that the Quranic paradise as immaterial is having hierarchies. So people move into that paradise based on their level of purity, based on the level of, faith and righteousness and closeness to God. The closeness to God is an important fact. So you are as close. If you go as close as possible to God, you go to the garden of God. So probably maybe the kingdom of God in another language. But if you are good, but not as good as, but you see different degrees of paradise in this scripture. But anyway, there is one thing also. God in the Quran says that He is the one who prepares that garden for believers. And also there's one thing. Adam and Eve were living in a garden, were in a garden, which apparently in Islamic interpretation of Quran is the garden of God, in Arabic described as my garden in the Quran. And then after taking those, taking the fruits, God asked them to go out or go down. This going down means that probably for some is an expression to show that the other gardens are, or the other places, this is the highest probably position or point in talking about garden, the garden of God, in which, as I mentioned, also there's the notion of God, one preparing the garden, and secondly providing wine for, I mean, those pure wine, pure heaven wine for those people who are living there. So that's the rest of the discussion. We go back to the next slide, which is about paradise in the Quran. And that paradise is, I'm sorry, not the paradise, but the hell and hellfire in the Quran, explaining kind of very painful description of those who are, dragged into the fire, hellfire. There's boiling water, when we talked about the paradise or heaven, we said that it might be a metaphorical, language. What about the hellfire? Is there fire and then people are, dragged and dropped into the fire? A Sufi explanation of hell tells that, well, there's no fire. The fire is within a human being, within someone who tried and made things that distanced him from his God and his Lord. And he is preparing his own fire, which was kind of, in a way, we talked about the heaven and we talked about the gardens. That's to say that Quran says that God provides the garden for people of faith or good people with good conduct. And then here, the idea is that people of hell, they do provide their hell fire for themselves. That's the notion. At least I guess we talked about this, about the unbelievers last session, who are, they are causing the distance between them and God. And so, as if it is a circle, and in the middle of the circle is God, and then if faith makes you go to closer and closer to the middle point, the faithlessness or unbeliever, or rejecting that faith also takes you far away from the center of that circle, which in another word is called hell, and the opposite is called heaven. Let me see if I can share the other slide. So also interestingly, you see that some Quranic verses also talk about the discussion and conversation between people of hell and people of heaven, and people of hell are asking people of heaven if they can give them some of those, like fruits or water or whatever they have, but in fact they are abandoned to give them anything. So yes, here is that verse 7, chapter 7, verse 44 and 49, talking about the people in the fire will call those in paradise, pour down water on us, or some of that which God has provided you. You see that the word provided to you. They will reply, God has forbidden them to the unbelievers. So those things are forbidden to unbelievers, while God has provided for the believers. So true opposition and group of people, and those residents. So as far as we talk about the heaven and the trees and the fruits over there, also the opposition is happening in the garden, in the hellfire, which is the water is boiling water, and there are angels guarding the hell. I mean, probably guarding people, not whatever, but also the fruits are there, but the bitter fruits. So everything is bad. Everything tastes bitter. Everything is painful. The opposition happened to paradise, which is everything is joyful, everything is in peace, everyone is in peace, everyone enjoys the fruits and whatever they want. And then accordingly, the best and highest joy for human soul in that paradise or in hereafter is the reunion with his Lord. This is what mostly discussed in Sufi literature. But for generally people, when they desire the fire, when they desire the paradise, they talk about the fruits, they talk about the gardens, they talk about the rivers. But the people of, the Sufis, or the people of the higher intention, they talk about the reunion and join and annihilation in God, which is as I mentioned, my garden refers to that state of annihilation. So, kind of a very brief discussion about post-Quranic eschatology. So we know that every religion talked about the end of the time, as well in Islamic sources, like in the Hadith literature. You do have many talks and sayings about the end of the time and what is happening prior to the day of judgment. What will be the fate of nations in this world? The idea of justice. What will happen? Is there finally justice in this world or not? Okay, so Quran, in another sense, says that whatever of injustice or corruption happen on the earth is because of the act and practice of people on the earth. So the corruption, even the Quran talks about the corruption in the seas, in the oceans, that happened because of human beings. So human is the cause of many of those corruption on the earth in the Quranic sense. But now, one question is that whether there will be justice in the world, in this world, before going to the next world, and if yes, how it will be. You know that we do have the idea of the end of the time in Christianity, in Judaism, probably, and also Islam and Zoroastrianism as well, and other religions. I mean, that's a very common idea in religion, talking about end of the time. So Islam, I mean, I'm talking about the literature. Yes, Quran talks about that the people of faith will be inherited the earth. But there is no talk, not much in detail talk about how and, other things. But there's some very kind of short expressions about that. When you go to the Hadith literature, you will see that, yes, the idea is that there will be someone appointed by God coming and appears at the end of the time, leading people into justice, fighting with those who are, bringing injustice and making humanity to suffer from a lot of things. And then he is the one who brings justice to the world. And however, I mean, this is a general picture of what is called Mahdi or Mahdism. Now, when Islamic literature talks about Mahdi and Mahdism, then you do have also ideas of who is that Mahdi. I mean, there are many different versions of interpretation of that Mahdi. I mean, Shiites believe that he is the 12th of the 12 imams of their school of thought, and they believe that he is now in occultation, and he returns when God. I mean, he is invisible. He was living in historically speaking, Mahdi was living in early second Islam century, and then but because of the will of God, he disappeared from people, and then he will return and he will reappear to people, will be will be visible to people, lead people to justice, fight with those who are, causing injustice and making people to suffer from different things, and shows the mercy of God. Now he's called Mahdi, but there were, in the history of Islam, since, let's say, second Islamic century, there were group of people, even individuals, that they were claiming that I am Mahdi, I am Mahdi, I am Mahdi. So they caused a lot of political tensions and, uprisings and whatever. You can look at the history of Mahdism in Africa, in Islamic countries here and there. And so those ideas of Mahdism with the people, but they climb, and some other people, they enjoyed believing them. Some of them also ended up to be a kind of a sect of a religion or a cult, having a cultish culture or section of a religion. They exist both here and there. Yeah, one of the final ideas about the hellfire maybe is the bridge of Sirat. When we were discussing about the opening chapter of Quran, we talked about a word in the chapter, in the opening chapter, which was Sirat, and we said that in Latin there is a word called strada, which means in English to render to a street, and in Arabic to Surat. But surprisingly, the Surat, the path, and the Quran only used for a spiritual or non-material path. It's like a path toward God. Also the bridge, which is called the Surat. So bridge Surat also is the bridge that people, if one have to go to the paradise, he has to pass through that bridge. Now, however, may folk people take it as a literal meaning of a very tiny bridge that they have to pass it, otherwise, if not, I mean, it's based on their good or bad conduct that they can pass it, or they can fall down to the hellfire. So the point is that it's another allegorical idea in the Quran, that passing toward paradise is not easy, because there is also the notion of Satan, who who aggressively is in preparation to attack human being in order to not let him to end up in the paradise of God, because he is essentially his enemy of human being. So passing through that bridge means that passing through the passions of your ego, passing through the many probably decisive kind of things that Satan brings to human being and tries to deviate him from the right path, again, from Sirat al-Mustaqim, the right path. So that's also the path, a bridge of Sirat, which is, it seems to be an allegorical idea of reaching to the paradise, as one has to pass through all those difficulties and go there. So now I'm trying to kind of put an end to the discussion of heaven and hell and the day of judgment in the Quran. Sometimes I try to make a comparison or show the similarities with the Bible. I will do this later on for our next discussion, more and more. And I hope you enjoyed the discussion. If there's any question, please let me know. And yeah, have a good time and enjoy your week.